Well, Jeremy, it's certainly a pleasure to sit down with you today and talk about some of the things happening within KCF. Obviously, this time of year, you're normally doing the customer summit and giving a keynote address, but that can't happen this year. And so this is a nice way for you to be able to share some of those thoughts along the way.
Yeah, Kevin, welcome, and I'm really glad to have the chance to sit down with you. The summit is really one of the high points of the year and a chance where we get to sit down with our best customers. And I normally give a keynote presentation, and we thought that would be a little, a better format for capturing that information is to have a conversation, because the best part for me particularly is just the dialogue that follows and having conversations with our customers about the most pertinent topics happening this year.
Yeah. Well, as you know, in our organization, we really focus on helping organizations navigate the disruption of business transformation. In our conversations, KCF is very focused on the industrial transformation aspects of organizations, and so it's a nice synergy in that conversation. And so I think we can have some good dialogue and discussion about that today.
Excellent.
I thought it'd be good to maybe start with today is that idea of kind of why industrial transformation now? So what's kind of the driver of that currently, and how are you seeing that through your organization's lens today?
Sure, and we have this really broken up into sort of three key topics, and the first one being that industrial transformation is real. And that's something that I really believe. I would go back to a story that actually predates me. 50 years ago, actually, it's not my story, it's my father's story. He was working for Sikorsky Helicopter, and he was actually in Vietnam, in Saigon in the late 60s, actually arrived there during the Tet Offensive in 1968, but was there doing work similar to what KCF does, reliability, investigations focused on helicopters. And it actually wasn't in Vietnam, but back operating out of a base in Western Germany. A couple years later, in 1971, there was a very tragic helicopter crash. And it was a large heavy lift, I believe it was a CH-47 Chinook helicopter, was flying just a routine transport across the country, and the tail rotor of the helicopter failed catastrophically. The helicopter crashed, everyone on board was killed and just badly burned. It was just a horrible tragedy. You can still find news about it online, and the reason it's relevant is because my father's job was to actually go there to the wreckage and investigate and try to find out what was the root cause of this failure. And that was his job. He'd been doing this for several years in a very challenging environment. So interestingly enough, and it relates because what the story so this is a story I grew up with, and what I recall is that when he really got down to it, what had caused the failure was something that really never should have happened. There was actually a sensor that was part of the feedback for the control of the helicopter, and it wasn't supported properly. And so it was vibrating and giving the wrong signal to the controls, and that caused ultimately the highly damaging behaviors to cause the blades to ultimately rupture and fail. And 37 people lost their lives, and these were people dedicated in their service to the country, and it's just a tragedy that, anyway, I grew up with that, learning those stories. The way it relates is just sort of amazing. 50 years later, here we are, and the same type of thing happens all the time across industry. And it's really, it's also tragic, and it's a solvable problem. And it relates, right, the good thing is that there is technology available. Transformation, industrial transformation fueled by technology is real, and that's what we're really here to talk about.
Yeah. Well, it sounds that really had a huge impact on your father, but also on you. And I think it's probably driven you in that desire and drive to help resolve some of those issues even today. So you could talk maybe a little bit more about kind of where we're at in that journey now and why industrial transformation is so real today.
Yeah, well, it's very real because the problems still exist. So much has changed. If you think about the last 50 years, just think about the advances in telephones, fax machines, internet, smartphones, Google Glass. Fax machines were new within the last 50 years, and it's amazing. And then advances in medical technology and also advances in industrial technology. There have been just massive improvements across the entire industrial landscape and human landscape. And yet, there are these problems with industrial machinery that remain largely unsolved. And it's this huge blind spot. We see it everywhere we go in the industrial world. You go into a paper plant, and I've seen there are huge tanks of chemicals that are literally moving back and forth during their operations, cracking the foundation, pulling the bolts off. There's chemicals spilling onto the floor, leaking out of the seals of the pumps. You go on to these world-class auto assembly lines, and there's, in some cases, there's debris, there's like garbage almost getting in the moving parts, the belts and the gearboxes. There's cranes that are moving heavy things overhead, and I've seen just shavings, like piled up shavings of metal, because the contraptions that are moving them back and forth are so badly aligned or badly wearing. There are things in the oil and gas. There are things in the oil and gas industry where industrial piping is vibrating 40 to 50 times higher than international standards, and these are pipes carrying upwards of 10,000 psi, which when they fail, it's catastrophic and even fatal. And so it's just, you see this stuff, and it's really amazing. I mean, even in the best-in-class factories that we see, like some of the Japanese auto manufacturers who really have adopted best-in-class practices, even there, we see machines where literally there's a motor that is cooling a larger motor, a motor driving a fan, and it has vibrated so much that the screws fall out, and when someone finds it, it's laying on the ground. Yeah. And it's just, and there are reasons. I don't mean to judge, because these problems are very difficult to solve because there's so much machinery. And because we're accomplishing so much in industry, it's just very difficult to notice and solve these problems.
Well, I mean, the examples you've given are profound. I mean, you think those would really get people's attention. They'd be actively out there trying to figure out at a senior level in an organization, and the mid-level, and on the floor how to resolve that. So what are some of the things that seem to be the challenge in getting people to take action in really owning that realism of this need for transformation and taking the actions necessary to limit some of this challenge you've identified?
Yeah, it's a great question, because there's no lack of desire for improvement. These people are industrial heroes, making the products that the electricity, the power, the oil, the gas, the vehicles, everything that we depend on as citizens is produced in these factories. And there are people who wake up every day and try to run these factories as well as you possibly can. There's no lack of desire. And at the corporate level, most corporate leadership is aware of this industrial transformation, Industry 4.0. They want it. And I think there's a sense, there's a lack of awareness, a lack of belief that it's really possible, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I read recently in a study that like 66% of organizations have an industrial transformation strategy in place, but only about 8% are actually accomplishing dramatic results. And so you mentioned there's a desire to change this and pursue the transformation, but things get in the way. So what could we be doing better within our own organizations to build that sense of urgency and build that sense of drive and truly achieve some of these great results that are possible in this pursuit?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting statistic, and the data that supports that. We've seen the same type of indicators. Just at the interesting level, we probably starting around 5 years ago, maybe a little more, we started deploying some technology with the start of success, maybe 7 years ago. And something that started to happen is we would encounter customer applications where there was already wireless sensors installed on the machinery. And in fact, I had pictures on my phone, I'd get them more frequently now, of garbage cans filled up with wireless sensors that had been installed. And it's kind of sad, but it's true. So again, it wasn't for a lack of trying, it was for a lack of execution. And the simple reality is it's difficult. Industrial transformation is not easy. And most people that have tried it will tell you that. And I think that's part of the reason for the 8% success and the 66% attempt is there's just a track record of failure, including us. I mean, so if I roll back the clock 5 years or so, we had a pretty fortunate convergence with a very interesting industry, the upstream oil and gas industry here in North America. And basically, at the time, they go through a lot of ups and downs. It's a tumultuous industry, and right now we're in a very low down, so it's a severe time today. But in 2014 into 15, we were in a boom, and basically what the customers were feeling was this, confusion and uncertainty as to how to solve these problems, but they were aware of the problems. In fact, there was a maintenance manager not far from here in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, was one of the first early learnings of this, and he was literally pulling his hair out, and he had about as much hair as I do. So it was
I tried that once, it worked so well.
it was metaphorical, but he was trying to understand why, this class of pumps, they have these big pumps, like so many customers do, why they kept failing and failing and failing and failing, and he was just confused and uncertain. And so were we. But what we were able to do was get some sensors installed, get the data flowing, and what we found out was relatively quickly we were able to identify the root cause of that problem. And it was basically it was a convergence of technology and then just roll up your sleeves problem solving with their involvement, not just us, but us helping them. And it's the convergence of using the technology effectively, we were able to make dramatic improvements right away. And then we just started peeling back the onion. And from then till now, these 5 years, we have been doing that in that industry exhaustively and then expanding what we've learned from an approach standpoint to all these other industries that we now serve.
So as you described that, I love the way you put that it was us working with them. They had some drive in that. There was some technology you could bring to the table, some grit and some energy, roll our sleeves up and get in there and work at it. If I think about an organization, so in my organization, I really would like to pursue this stronger. What are some of those maybe keys for success or ideas that you found really work well to help us drive towards some dramatic impact from our transformation efforts?
Well, I think the first thing that I would suggest, or just to reinforce, and in fact, I'll go back just a half step, because that 8% out of 60% statistic, we see that, but I actually think it's worse than that.
Oh, wow.
And that's because companies, no one really knows what's possible, because you're basically eliminating a blind spot, or you're eliminating cancer that you didn't actually know was there. And so how much of that cancer you eliminate is subject to interpretation relative to what's possible. And so I think that the way to really start to rally around the objective is to understand what's possible. And what's possible with our best users of technology, they have achieved more than what I think anyone would expect is possible. To the tune of over this period of 5 years, 2015 to now, there are companies that have eliminated 90% of their safety incidents while doubling their productivity and increasing the life of their critical equipment by 2.5 times. And I think if you were to survey those 66% of companies that have a transformation plan, an Industry 4.0 plan, I don't think anybody would set a goal that lofty. And yet, it happened. This is something that has already happened. And I want to be clear, this is something our customer achieved. Now, I will say it would never have happened without our involvement, but it's something that the customer achieved because of other activities and other operational excellence initiatives, and just a desire to pursue a lofty objective. And it's amazing. I mean, it's a great story. So the main thing I would say is just really, really commit to believing that that's possible, and then it becomes easier to form your plan.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because I think it's easy to try to set a goal, but if we really don't know what that's about and what is possible. I mean, hearing what you just said about decreasing safety incidents so significantly, I think going into this, it'd be hard to envision that up front. So I like the idea of set the foundation, really understand the situation, know what we're really measuring is what I hear you saying, and then begin to set real goals around that. So I kind of get some of those goals in place, get some of that idea. There are some other key things you would look at, Jeremy, that would say, from our experience, here are two or three additional things that really help you make that transition more quickly and begin to realize some of those great results that you're seeing in customers today?
Sure, I think there are several. What I've found, we've seen a lot of success and even more failure, our own and our customers. And what I think is good, strong leadership, but not necessarily C-suite leadership. It's important to have C-suite support, but the nitty-gritty of this really happens in the factory. It's not in the data center, it's in the factory. And what that means is strong operational leadership happening within the operational teams, the ops team, the engineering teams, the maintenance teams, the reliability teams. Where we've seen success is where there's been best-in-class execution of those teams, and ideally working in concert, which is rare. And because when it really starts to click, and it does click, and it's just a great process. This is very real. Industrial transformation is very real, but it's also fun. And it improves your bottom line, but it really starts with the workers. When the workers start to believe that this technology can make their work safer, can create less firefighting, they can spend more of their time doing proactive things rather than reactive things, it elevates everything about their work, and they enjoy it, and they love working with us. So it's really just a positive story, and it starts with the workers, but the key second component is the technology. The reason that we found all those sensors in those garbage cans is because the technology also has to be easy to use. It has to be able to integrate with the legacy systems that are usually already there, and it also has to interface with the workflows. So maintenance workflows, for example, every company has a certain way of doing things, and if you don't interface easily with those, the 8% success rate will continue.
Yeah, so as I hear you describe that, I kind of hear a couple of key things in there. You got to understand kind of what we're measuring and why, understand our current situation. So how do things integrate and connect today? And then I heard really building partnerships internally with teams inside the organization, and partners with KCF, where you say, now we can begin to work together to accomplish this. And then I almost heard you say that then helps us build that sense of belief and support from the more senior level. And so I kind of hear this as we might have this kind of top-down strategy around industrial transformation, but it's really a bottom-up effort to make it really work and bring it together and make it function. Am I hearing that correctly? Is that kind of what you were describing? Is there anything else in there that stands out in your mind?
No, I think you captured it very well, and that's what we've experienced. Again, this isn't something we figured out. Yeah. We tried it top-down, we tried it sideways, we tried it with technology, but we also tried it by just working with the workers, building a solid foundation, and then building success one solution at a time. And that's what has worked for our best-in-class customers. And belief is a big part of it, because you have to believe that you might have a problem that's solvable. And the simple reality is everyone does in the industrial world. It's just the reality of the way things are right now. And so, once you do that, you can really believe in a better industrial future. Yeah. And I think what you can ask is, for those that we're speaking to, that we're working with, is just to really wonder what will it be like in the future? What would it be like if you eliminated 90% of your safety incidents? Right. What would it be like if you doubled your productivity, doubled your machine life?
Yeah. I think sometimes we try to be so realistic in our expectations, we almost set them too low, is what I hear you saying. And so the alignment I hear you talking about is how do we build alignment around that belief? And that's from all levels of the organization, all parts of the organization really buying into what can be.
That's right.
And so I think you've really created a nice picture for us in this conversation, Jeremy, around the fact that industrial transformation is real, and now is the time to really be engaging in that. And so as we kind of summarize that together, what are maybe a couple of key takeaways in your mind that you hope I walk away with, or those listening today say, yeah, here's a couple of key things that tell me this is real, now's the time, here's what I can begin to do to have a real impact in my own organization?
Yeah, well, what I would say is, it's just like the helicopter crash from 50 years ago. Wow. There's been so much improvement, so much technology development. It's unfathomable, the technology development that's happened. And yet, these problems still exist. Yeah. And I don't, off the top of my head, the OSHA and worker safety statistics, it's something on the order of 5,000 American workers are killed each year. Wow. And how much of that is directly due to machine failure, I don't know that number, but that's just one way to quantify the problem. They are very real, and just like 50 years ago to now, the problem still exists, but the difference is that it's entirely possible to take a serious dent out of at least half of those problems, and that's basically what we're really deep into.
Good, excellent. Well, thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate some of those insights, stories to help us understand the foundation of this, and looking forward to continue our conversation in the future around how do we take it from recognizing the issue and the need and now move it forward in a very positive way. So thank you for the comments and input today.
Likewise, Kevin. Thank you very much.